electronic commerce. In gewoon Nederlands elektronische handel. En daar bedoelen we tegenwoordig mee dat je bijvoorbeeld via het internet of via andere digitale netwerken zaken doet. Dat kan als je ook kunt betalen, dat is daar een belangrijk gedeelte voor. Maar een heel ander gedeelte is dat al het formulierenwerk, het papierwerk, via die elektronische netwerken veel makkelijker kan. Veel efficiënter. Zeker in het Europa van vandaag. Een Europa wat steeds meer naar elkaar toe groeit. We praten met Roger Dean en hij is you're the chairman of the European Electronic Messaging.
Executive director, actually, but next year, who knows?
Who knows? What is the EEMA?
It's the European Electronic Messaging Association. It's a neutral forum for vendors, suppliers and users to come together to drive forward the industry and to ensure that electronic commerce really is here to stay.
If I understand it well, electronic commerce means pushing out the paper money, making things virtual and thereby maybe a little bit more efficient?
It means selling selling products via the internet, via the World Wide Web. For instance, there's a bookshop in America that has 2.5 million publications on its website. It only holds in stock 400 publications. So it shows that people have a much wider choice and they can purchase things much easier on the web.
Now, you're here in Maastricht, if I have a bookshop in Maastricht and I hold 5,000 books only and I feel the competition from this company in America, I wouldn't be very happy.
Well, I think if you were a bookshop here in Maastricht, then maybe you should have a website. It takes very little of effort and money to set that up. And you can join with other bookshops and form specific interest groups. You can have discussions with authors, for instance, on the web. So you can actually have groups of people with an interest in cooking or Star Trek, coming together. So you can generate more interest and in that way generate more business.
Now, part of that business is that you can then, as a consumer, buy cheaper. Now, a while ago in Holland there was quite an uproar about the fact that you could order CDs, music CDs, cheaper in America, and they were sent, and then the price was even lower than when you would buy locally. Then the government stepped in, or in fact the government pushed by the trade organization protecting the CD trade and said, oh, no, this is illegal, what they call grey import, and they stopped it.
The problem is, how do you stop it? It's virtually impossible to buy a CD in America. It comes in a brown little envelope through the post. I mean, it's happening too much to stop. The only thing you can do is make it illegal and then make examples of people and prosecute them. But the issue is not just CDs, it's even worse than that. It's software. People are buying software on the web. It's being transmitted over the phone lines. The government doesn't even have a clue what's going on. And this is a whole...
But governments don't like that.
They don't like it, but unfortunately the internet and the World Wide Web have gone beyond legislation. They're happening much quicker than governments can react. And this is
but governments do react, and with proposals for encryptions where they have the keys and the citizen don't have it and they have access to electronic mail. What is the EEMA doing against, or what's your position?
Well, we're obviously in favour of providing legislation, but some of the government actions and proposals are really unworkable. The UK government, the Department of Trade and Industry, has put up a proposal that they should have access to everyone's private keys, so they can look at any message that goes over any of the internet. And we've said, no, this isn't right, and so have a lot of other organisations. And so the whole government structure has to rethink what is feasible and what is practical, because they may say this is wonderful legislation, but you would solve the unemployment in the world immediately if you had to enforce some of these regulations.
Well, some of these regulations seem to be very broad. In the US, understood, the FBI has the right to monitor 10% of all electronic mail for security, national security reasons. Now, well, as you say, that would take a lot of people to do all that work.
Oh, exactly. And in the US, they seem to be setting the standards for this type of privacy, and it's really against the Fourth Amendment.
Freedom of speech. Yeah.
Absolutely, and protection of that. And so the US government have got problems. The UK government seem to be following their legislation, and I'm sure the rest of Europe will follow that. And
That seems to be the case. A while ago there was this Clipper legislation about this encryption, and it's like carbon copying the US approach. Then the European governments did the same thing. When the Americans decided Clipper was unworkable, it took about 6 months before the Europeans realized they couldn't do it themselves.
Well, that's one of the problems we got at this show. The US government have put in place restrictions which is really hampering the European developers, the European companies' ability to compete with Americans, because they're stopping encryption, really secure encryption, coming out of the US.
Yeah, let's explain what encryption is. That's coding, a way to make your mail, your commercial messages, your invention, whatever, private.
Yes.
So nobody else can see it, and for that you need mathematical formulas, and that whole technology is called encryption. And the Americans say, too good encryptions we don't allow to fall in the hands of the rest of the world.
That's right, because governments, although they have the best interests at heart, are saying that the mafia or criminals could send encrypted messages, and we must have access to all the public keys and the private keys so we can read any message we want to. The only flaw in that is that mafia and the criminals won't register. They'll carry on just the same. But encryption is like having two keys to a safe. You can open the safe on one side and put a message in it so that no one can see it, but only the person who receives the message can open it on the other side and actually read that message. So it's a very secure way of sending messages, and financial institutions are using it a great deal to, obviously, to secure.
Because that is now the big challenge in electronic messaging is not, well, you can sell products and you can sell software, but it needs to be paid. And therefore, what's happening on that front? What are the visas of this world doing to secure, safe financial transactions?
Okay, up until quite recently, there was a financial network which was very secure and only the banks could use it. But now, with people buying things over the World Wide Web, Visa has in fact said that they will guarantee a payment on a credit card. If someone takes your credit card on the World Wide Web and uses it, Visa will reimburse you for that. And quite honestly, I think the World Wide Web is much more secure than, say, going into a restaurant where they'll double swipe your credit card and use that anyway. So I think the issues are very emotive, that the World Wide Web isn't as unsecure as you would imagine.
Yet the news is full of big stories about backdoors into Netscape or Microsoft Explorer. I think most problems suffer from people that find out, there's a little flaw there, a little bug that you left out, and now we can not only see your financial transaction, but get into your computer and steal your Visa code.
You only hear about the very small minority of things that just go wrong, and in every industry things go wrong. Businesses are using the internet now for trade and electronic commerce, and it's increasing at a phenomenal rate.
But 2 years ago, when there was not very secure financial transactions, and then it happened about a year ago, slowly it's emerging. Are you disappointed, or do you think the growth of electronic commerce is up to your expectations, or lagging a little bit behind?
Electronic commerce is actually anything to do with doing business electronically, and that could be just retrieving information from the web, putting it up on the web. There's a very small proportion still, about 7 or 8%, actually doing money transactions on the World Wide Web. But most of it is information dissemination and collection, and that's helping businesses improve their productivity. It's getting them to market quicker, and the electronic commerce train is leaving the station. If you're not on it, then you're going to miss out.
That's a story we heard 3 years ago about consumers on the internet. In the meantime, it turned out that it might not be the mass medium some people expected that it's more a trade medium, it's a business-to-business medium. It has a great future for research, for certain application, maybe for the elite that has the money and the time and the computers to work on, but it's not going to be a mass medium. So why would electronic commerce be a mass medium?
I think you'll find that you're absolutely right, but I think you'll find that libraries will have access to the web, just as people go into a library to look at reference books. There'll be access to the World Wide Web, but there is a problem, and there could be a separation of society to the cash-rich, time-poor people who trade on the web, do their shopping on the web. They'll have electronic supermarkets, and those electronic supermarkets will in fact look at your preference of buying, so that when you walk into your electronic supermarket, you will see in front of you the shelves of the products you most often buy. And you will then, if you drink a lot of wine, they will probably put some Alka-Seltzers next to on the shelf. So
but these are nice dreams.
It's happening now.
Yeah, but these are the stories that we read in the Bill Gates books, and how we all should have this digital dream state and utopia. This, what the people in the street want to know. I'm 65 years old. I never used a computer. People are talking about internet, electronic commerce. Should I buy one? Am I left out? Do I have to beg for my money if I don't join the internet? That's the worries of the ordinary people.
No, I don't think anyone needs to worry. If you have these trends and you enjoy going to the shops and you're going to buy it that way, that's fine. Eventually, the generation... I mean, none of these things happen quickly. The internet, after all, is 30 years old. It's only in the last 4 or 5 years that Tim Berners-Lee at CERN devised the
World Wide Web,
which is a HTML language,
yes, which made it possible to address or to get to pages of information in a more simple way, and in a way that was the same all over the world.
It unified all the databases in the world, and that's the key to the World Wide Web. It's an enormous information base, and
it's an enormous database. And information is if you can use it. And
yes.
Isn't that the question?
I think if you have access to the World Wide Web, and I think the younger generation, I've got 2 daughters. They come in from home. They've got a CD on their PC. They don't write anymore. They know where to go and get information. It's just the way we do business.
Roger, simple question. My daughter is here. Katelijne, you use the internet for business. Do you use it privately for yourself?
No.
So you're 2 against my 1.
Well, I win 2 against 1.
Okay, so obviously there are people who like it, but
yeah.
Not everybody.
No, and as I said, it will gradually come through the generations as the daughters look at something like Encarta. The new Encarta has got access to web addresses, so you pull your information down, and you get the up-to-date information from the web. It's a combination of technologies.
Okay, we're here in Maastricht at the European or the Electronic Commerce Conference. What is the hot topic here?
Hot topic is security across the internet.
The people here are discussing, exchanging technical details, protocols, agreements, contract to make sure that all over the world the same security is guaranteed.
Mm. Well, the internet is very much like a postcard. You write on it, you put it in a letterbox, anyone can read it, and it may actually get there. It may get there in 2 days. It may not get there at all. And at the moment, what we're demonstrating here is a secure, trusted way of trading over the internet, which has never been possible anywhere in the world. This is the first time in the world that you can see it.
Okay, so there is progress on the internet.
Progress, slow but sure.
Thank you, Roger Dean.
Pleasure.
Can I be holding the bottle of wine as we're talking?
Okay. Internet. It grows, but how fast does it grow? Where does it grow? What sectors of industry are using it more than others? We're talking with Erik Arnhem. Can you tell something about the general growth of the internet over the past few years?
Well, it's been roughly doubling every 12 to 18 months in size, and that growth rate is also taking place in Europe.
Are there countries in Europe that are growing faster or that had a head start?
Well, it's very interesting because the initial growth in the internet in Europe was in places like Sweden and the Netherlands and England. and Germany, and really around the North Sea area. Lately, the growth has been shifting now to the Mediterranean countries, Portugal, Spain, Italy. Greece is growing very quickly now, and France is also, and also Belgium.
Is there an explanation for that in terms of either language or resources, connections?
Well, I think that the growth of the internet has very closely followed the countries that have a very large population of English-speaking people. Netherlands, Norway, England, of course, Ireland, Sweden. And lately there's been some ways found to use the Latin alphabets, the French with the accented characters and so on. So you're seeing a lot of shift now to countries where there is a slightly different alphabet, and places like Italy where there's not a whole lot of English speakers, but they find very good uses for the internet.
When you say the internet is doubling, are you talking about the people that have website, or are you talking about the end users, or the level of the traffic?
The number of computers connected to the internet is doubling roughly every 12 to 18 months. The number of pages being put on websites is growing at an enormous rate. I would say it's a 400 or 500% a year.
And where are we? Are we up to 100 or 150 million pages yet?
I think we've gone past, worldwide, I think we've gone past about 100 million pages. And in Europe, I would say that's around 25% of that. And the largest countries in Europe for web pages right now are England, Germany, and surprisingly, Italy is in third place.
Which means they have put a large proportion of their libraries on the web.
People everywhere are creating material for the web. It's incredibly exciting to watch the variety of material that is being produced. Everything from national broadcasting companies to students in their dormitories are creating web pages. It's a very dynamic phenomenon in that everybody is creating web pages.
Now there must be millions and millions of individual people with their homepage. Aren't they disappointed now that the traffic on their specific homepage of, say, John Doe somewhere in England is less than he expected?
Well, there's a lot of competition for viewership, as you would know in the business that you're in. You have to make your pages interesting, and you have to get something on that page that makes people come back again and again. I've seen web pages that are as trivial as a university student listing the contents of his room on his web page.
If it's an interesting room.
And actually even the contents of his garbage can, to something that is very involved, something like a news site which is changed several times a day. So it really is a question of how do you find it? And for that there's a lot of search engines. There's a lot of different ways now to find content on the web based on your interests, and references from other sites. Mm-hmm. This site will tell you about that site, and that site will tell you about the other site,
links to
and so on. Yeah. So the challenge now is, I've heard the web described as a library where all the books are on the floor, in no particular order. I think the order is coming now. I think that the search engines are starting to catalog all the content and
make it more accessible.
Make it easier to find, yeah.
Eric, you said that in some countries are more or less catching up. Do you see that the growth in say, Holland, England is slowing down?
There is, in England in particular, also Sweden and Holland, it's clearly you cannot double forever, because you start to run out of people, you start to run out of computers, you start to run out of households. They're still growing at a healthy rate, but they're no longer doubling every year. They were early adopters on the internet, as let's say the university market in the US were early adopters. You get to a point where you saturate the market and everybody who wants internet access has it.
Is there an idea about the level, say the percentage of PC owners that are interested? Is that 25%, 50%, 60%, or 99% of PC owners who eventually get on the net?
In the United States, it seems to be around 20% of households seems to be the plateau where the growth sort of levels off, and it's very hard to grow above 20%. In Europe,
But that's comparable with what we had, what we would call the hi-fi phenomenon. People who had money enough to buy a hi-fi audio set, while other people had to do with normal radios. Is that the same thing, or is internet going to be like television? Everybody has it.
No, it'll never be like that. There's a level of technical skill that certainly it requires you to understand personal computing, it requires you to understand data communications, and it also requires you to understand English, unfortunately. Worldwide, I'm not sure what the share of the internet in English is, but in most of the European countries, I find that around a third of the content and a third of the sites are in English only. About a third of the sites are bilingual with the national language, the local language, and English, and around a third of the sites are in only the local language. So what that means is that somebody who speaks the native language can only see 2/3 of the sites, and somebody who speaks English can see the other 2/3 of the sites. But to program, to produce material for the internet, you really still do need to understand English, and that's still a very significant barrier. And also with electronic mail, you really do need to use the English alphabet, because a lot of the characters that are in the Scandinavian languages or in the German, French, Italian languages.
Japanese.
Oh, I'm not even thinking of those, but just the European alphabets are not always supported in the internet electronic mail.
So summing it up, you would say there is a technical level that would be, say, an upper level. People have to be able to use the computer, but also the language is going to be a plateau.
There's a great saying in America. There's a whole lot of VCRs that are blinking midnight. And I think that's also applicable to the internet. There's a whole lot of people who can't set the clock on their VCRs, yet they own them. I think you'll see that on the internet as well.
Thank you. This was Erik Arnhem. Change.